today we are looking at multiplying polynomials. I've separated it into 3 different categories. So our first category would be multiplying polynomials by monomials. So expressions with more than one term times the one term. Our second category is binomials times binomials. So that would be a 2-term polynomial times another 2-term polynomial. Number 3 is polynomials with 2 or more terms times polynomials with 3 or more terms. For today's lesson, we are actually just going to focus on the first 2, and we'll be visiting the third one in another lesson. So the first one we're looking at is monomials times polynomials. And in monomials times polynomials, I have an example for us to follow. In our example, our example is 3x squared, that's our monomial, and our polynomial that we're multiplying it by is 5x cubed minus 7x squared plus 2x minus 6. All right, and like I said last time, the first thing I like to do is get rid of all of subtraction and use only addition. So I'm going to add a line, change a sign everywhere I see subtraction. Now that I have that out of the way, what can I do to multiply all these terms? Because inside the parentheses, we have addition, and outside the parentheses, we have one term that we're trying to multiply by all of these terms. So what can we use? Right, so we're visiting our old friend, the distributive property. We're excited about that. All right, so what do we do for our distributive property? We take the term that's outside of the parentheses, and we can multiply by each term in the parentheses and add them together, and it would be the same thing as adding them together first and then multiplying. So our first term in our new expression will be 3x squared times 5x cubed. And then we will add our next one. So 3x squared times negative 7x squared. And remember, I added a line, change the sign, so I have to multiply by the negative. And we're going to do the same thing with our next one. And our next one, our last one. So 3x squared times negative 6. So now, since we've done the distributive property, we have to go through and do all of the multiplication. So we'll do, I'll even change the color so you can see, 3 times 5 for our coefficients, 15, and our variable, so we have x squared times x cubed. And what do we do with those exponents when we multiply with the same base? We add them. So 2 plus 3 is 5. So our new exponent is 5. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. So 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. X squared, so x to the 4th, plus 3 times 2, and then x squared. And then what is, if I just have an x, what power is that x raised to? A 1. So it's x to the 2 plus 1, which is 3. And finally, I have a positive 3 times a negative 6, which gives us a negative 18. And I have x squared times no other x, so I can keep my x squared. And we just multiplied a monomial by a polynomial. So now let's go into binomials by binomial. So binomial, which reminder is 2-termed polynomials. And that can look like a plus b times c plus d. And some of you might remember this we're going to use our FOIL method. So do we remember what FOIL means? What does the F in FOIL mean? First. What about the O? Outside. I. Inside. And the L? Last. So our first terms, our outside terms, our inside terms, and our last terms. So this is going to look like this. Our first terms are the first term in each binomial. So in our first binomial, we have A. In our second one, we have C. So that means we're going to do A times C. And we're going to add our outside. So what does our outside look like in our first one? B. What about our second? D. B times D. So now we have to multiply the inside. So what's our inside? Right, B and C. Because when we put our binomials together, we kind of created 4 different columns, and the 2 inside columns are B and C. And then, so what's our outside? What's our last term? I know I said outside, but I meant last term. So what is our last term? We've already done outside. If we look at our first polynomial, what's our last term? Oh crap, I did that wrong.